Visualize South Africa's unemployment crisis. Think of 1,000 FNB stadiums and say that's how many unemployed people we have in South Africa, around 10 million. And we've added to that another 23 FNB stadiums full of people in unemployed numbers coming out during September. And Bernstein, this keeps you awake at night. She is at the Center for Development and Enterprise, and you've been beating the employment drum for most of the last decade, probably more. And this crisis just gets bigger and bigger, and the hole gets deeper and deeper. We're in big trouble here, Anne.
It's terrifying, Bruce. I think that, if we were calling this a crisis before COVID, I don't know what words to use now except catastrophe. And I think the really big lesson for South Africa is that 10 years of talking, of job summits, of special interventions, of presidential interventions, of projects by the private sector, all of this has not helped. Because what it does, people keep trying to avoid the real issues. They want to talk about jobs as though it's something separate from growth. We can talk about jobs and then we can have a conversation about growth. This is the problem. We have to understand that the biggest challenge is scale, and that in order to deal with scale, we have to reform the labor market, and we have to get much faster, much more labor-intensive growth.
The only period in South Africa's recent history in which we've seen any substantive addition of jobs was probably between 2001 and 2007 or thereabouts, when economic growth was averaging between 4 and 5% a year. Interest rates were low, and the economy felt like it was finally coming to life. And that was all upended, firstly by the global financial crisis, and then South Africa's pitiful response, economic response to the global financial crisis, and of course the thieving and plundering that coincided with that. It's about growth, and this idea of inclusive growth, which has been put forward by business at NEDLAC, which government looks like it's desperate to ignore. It's sort of ignoring the elephant in the room because it comes at and the huge thing that I think government is struggling to get its head around is, oh my goodness me, but this will benefit the private sector. And it's a big, big blockage. It's this big, big blockage in the entire system.
I agree with you. I think the phrase inclusive economic growth trips off the tongue very easily, but very few people want to discuss what they mean by inclusion. We've thought a lot about this, and it has a number of aspects, all of which the country seems to fiddle around with, tweak, rather than dealing with. So for me, inclusion immediately starts with a basic job, even if it's not a great job. If you're getting your toe into the workforce, you're learning things, you're acquiring know-how, you're eyeing the next job up the ladder. So I think that's absolutely critical. And at the moment, we've got to hold on to all the jobs that we possibly can, and we've got to boldly change the environment for business. It's, you and I keep talking about this, but that's the key issue. Inclusion goes further than that. We have to fix our skills and training systems, which are expensive and are not delivering. You can look at the numbers, you can look at the throughput rates. It's not delivering, and those institutions are not close enough to the economy, to businesses and what they need. And then, of course, we have to fix our basic education system. I think it's criminal that 25 years into democracy, we're wallowing at the bottom end of any international assessment of how our education system performs. And, we need to do much, much better. It's not about money, because there are poorer countries in Africa that are getting much better results than South Africa. So all of these things, big issues, we failed to create an educated workforce over the last 40 years, 50 years, but that doesn't excuse South Africa's ineffective actions now. And so there's no better time than in this crisis to think seriously about how we get more and more people with very few skills into jobs. And we have one proposal, if you'd like to talk about that.
Please, I'm very keen to hear it, because right now I get a sense that there's the proposals being put forward to NEDLAC. Everybody within NEDLAC seems to be in broad agreement on these proposals, and the proposals then get taken to cabinet to die. Or certainly, if not to die, just to fester. So in a minute or two, if you can, a broad summary.
If you look at every other country in the developing world that has not found oil, what have they done? They've got similar challenges to us. They've gone the route of low-skill manufacturing, and what happens is if you can get into those global supply chains, not only workers start slowly moving up the ladder from my T-shirt to your shirt to more sophisticated things, but the firms themselves become more sophisticated. They learn about international markets and value chains, and they get connections and networks, and so both firms and people can benefit from starting low where your country is and being competitive and growing. And we've seen that in very many countries, from Costa Rica to Bangladesh to the Philippines to Cambodia, and of course China, Hong Kong, and so on. But we're proposing South Africa takes an experiment in Nelson Mandela Bay, next to or inside Kucha, where we've got sunk investment already. We're not saying you should subsidize firms or anything like that. They should pay tax. So we don't have money. We're not saying that. We're saying just free up this zone so that we can get foreign investment or domestic investment into low-end manufacturing and free them up from one or two other things.
And it's not like we don't have precedent. We were just talking to Simon Woodward at RMB about the motor manufacturing sector. And with the appropriate structures and incentives, we have a global industry operating out of multiple cities in South Africa, creating 450,000 jobs directly in and indirectly, with export markets generating revenues, paying taxes. This doesn't feel like it's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, Anne, and that's maybe what is so frustrating.
Our proposal, much cheaper. You and I could debate the automotive one for a long time, but you're absolutely right in terms of what it's created at great cost. Our proposal would be much cheaper. It would require a zone where we free up some laws and restrictions, and let's try it. So we've carefully calibrated our proposal and the details of it. So we're not saying let's upend the entire labor market or the rules of the labor market. We understand the political problems and we can't win that. Let's try this in one place and see, with the disruption of value chains from COVID, maybe South Africa can be competitive and find new markets overseas for products in Africa and elsewhere that unskilled people can work on, and in the process demonstrate a different approach, which is much cheaper than the automobile one in a number of respects.
Anne Bernstein at the Centre for Development and Enterprise. My thanks this evening to Anne Bernstein at the Centre for Development and Enterprise, also to Simon Woodward at